Oops, excuse me. Testing. You have it on. That's good. Very good.
Good morning.
Commissioner Young, this is Richard McGarvey at the Gaming Control Board public meeting. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. In fact,
You-
I was getting a little nervous that I hadn't heard from you.
Oh, that's good. You're obviously on the room. Everybody can hear you in the room.
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
Okay. So
Yes.
I think the meeting will get started here shortly.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay.
We're all enthusiastic and ready to go. Absolutely. My official scorekeeper told me I should start.
You've got what? Oh, that clock's wrong. Yeah, hey, we're going.
Oh,
It's 10 o'clock.
Hey, Don. You guys ready? Okay. Good morning. I'm David Barish, Chairman of the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. Before we begin, as always, I'd ask people to put their cell phones and electronic equipment on silent. With us today, Fred Strathmeyer, representing Russell Redding, Secretary of the Department of Agriculture. Good morning. Jen Langen, representing Joe Torsella, State Treasurer. And Bob Coyne, representing Acting Secretary of Revenue, Dan Hassel. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Commissioner Young is joining us by telephone. She's under the weather in Philadelphia. Good morning, Amina. Are you there?
I am here, sir. How are you?
Great. So now we have a full membership involved, quorum of the board members being present. I'll call the commission's proceedings to order. First order of business, the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we begin today, I think we have several service awards to give out. Is that right, Kevin?
Good morning, Chairman Barish. Good morning, members of the board. With the assistance of Human Resource Specialist Joe Bott, we're going to continue the process that we began, believe it or not, almost 2 years ago in June of 2015 of honoring and recognizing and showing our appreciation to employees who have reached the milestone of 10 years of service to the Gaming Control Board. These employees, through their loyalty and their commitment to their employment with us, have certainly contributed to the success of our agency. So Joe's going to help me. We have 10 honorees today. The first 5, please stand up and come forward a couple of feet. Okay, thank you. So our first honoree today is Todd Snyder. Todd was hired on March 19th, 2007 as an applications developer within the Office of Information Technology, a position that Todd continues to serve the agency in today. Congratulations and thank you for your service, Todd. Our next honoree is Karen Miller. Karen was also hired on March 19th, 2007 as a clerical support specialist for the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement. Today, Karen serves as an investigative analyst for the Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement. Congratulations, Karen, and thank you for your service. Next, we have Jen Schneider. Jen was hired on March 26, 2007 as a clerical support specialist for the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement. Today, Jen holds the position of licensing technician within the Special Services Unit for the Bureau of Licensing. Congratulations, Jen, and thank you for your service. Our next honoree is Kenneth Zalonis. Ken was also hired on March 26, 2017. I often wonder if you guys remember coming in on the same day. You two came in on the same day? No comments. Okay. Ken began his career as a hearing officer for the Office of Hearings and Appeals, and he continues to fulfill the responsibilities of hearing officer for our agency today. Ken, congratulations and thank you for your service. And our next honoree is Christine Moore. Christine was hired on April the 2nd, 2007 as an administrative analyst for the Bureau of Gaming Operations. Today, Christine serves as a compliance examiner for the Bureau of Gaming Operations. Thank you, Christine, and congratulations. So you 5 can sit back down and we'll continue the process. So the next 5 can come up. Perfect. Okay, our next honoree is Nicole Bayo. Nicole was hired on April 7th, 2007 as an administrative assistant for the Bureau of Licensing. Nicole now holds the position of licensing analyst for the gaming service provider unit within the Bureau of Licensing. Congratulations, Nicole, and thank you for your service. Our next honoree is Christopher Kalbarczyk. Chris was also hired on April the 9th, 2007, beginning his career as a technical field representative, a position that Chris holds today for the Bureau of Casino Operations. Congratulations and thank you for your service. Kathy Black is our next honoree, and she was hired on April the 16th, 2007 as an administrative assistant for the Employee Permitting Unit of the Bureau of Licensing. Today, Kathy holds the position of Executive Secretary for the Bureau of Casino Compliance. Congratulations, Kathy, and thank you. Our next honoree is Jennifer Midgley. Jen was hired on May the 14th, 2007 as an administrative assistant for the Bureau of Licensing. Currently, Jen is a licensing analyst for the Enterprise Licensing Unit within the Bureau of Licensing. Congratulations and thank you for your service. And our final honoree today is Elizabeth Kotzmoyer. Elizabeth was hired on May the 19th, 2007 as an investigative analyst for the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement. Today, Elizabeth holds the position of investigator for the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement. Congratulations and thank you for your service. So if we can all give a hand of applause to our employees. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Kevin, and thanks to everybody who came up for their years of service to the board and to the citizens of the Commonwealth. Now, moving on to our regular agenda, By way of announcements, the board held an executive session yesterday, May 16th, to conduct quasi-judicial deliberations relating to matters that we're going to be considering today. Next, we have consideration of a motion to approve the minutes and transcripts of the March 22nd and April 5th meetings. May I have such a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the minutes and transcripts of the March 22nd and April 5th, 2017 meetings.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The motion's adopted. Claire?
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. The Office of Human Resources has one motion for your consideration today relative to the hiring of two individuals. Ms. Ashley Gabriel has been selected as an Assistant Enforcement Counsel in the Office of Enforcement Counsel, and Ms. Sarah Heisey has been selected as an Administrative Assistant in the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement. Both individuals have completed the PGCB interview process, background investigation, and drug screening, and are recommended for hire by Chief Enforcement Counsel Cyrus Petrie and Director of BIE Paul Morrow, respectively. Unless you have any questions, I ask that the board consider a motion to hire Ms. Gabriel and Ms. Heisey as indicated.
May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applicants as proposed by the Administrative Director.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Thank you.
Doug Sherman, Office of Legal Counsel.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Today we have two petitions before you for consideration. Each can be decided on the documents filed of record as they are uncontested. For each of the matters, the board has, in advance of this meeting, been provided with all of the documentary evidence for both petitions. I believe on both of them, we've been told that the individuals had intended to appear today. I'm not sure if you want me to just call the name to see if they're here.
Let's do that.
Okay. The first being Brandy Michelli Cheatham.
Yes, she's here. Please come forward.
The first petition before the board.
One second.
Yes.
Before you proceed, Ms. Cheatham, could you please stand and be sworn in by the court reporter? State and spell your name.
Brandy Shelley Cheatham, Brandy Michelicheatham.
Swear affirm the testimony you're about to give this morning
Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead, Doug.
Thank you. The first matter before the board is the Office of Enforcement Counsel's request to revoke Brandy Michelli Cheatham's Gaming Employee 2 permit, as well as to place her on the board's involuntary exclusion list. The uncontested facts in the matter were that on July 15th, 2016, Ms. Michelli Cheatham, while employed as a table game supervisor at Sands and while working as a boxman at a craps table, took 6 $500 chips and placed them inside her clothing. After her conduct was identified, she was arrested and charged with theft by unlawful taking, as well as terminated from her employment with Sands. In August of 2016, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed the complaint to revoke her G2 permit and to request that she be placed on the involuntary exclusion list. Ms. Michelli Cheatham initially requested a hearing, but subsequently signed a waiver of that hearing, and therefore the matter is before the board based upon the documentary record. As indicated, Ms. Michelli Cheatham is present and has been sworn to address the board.
Before we hear from you, what is the status of the criminal complaint?
Hold on a second, Chairman. Steve?
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Michael Rowland, ROL A&D with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. My understanding is Ms. Cheatham has been offered the benefit of the ARD program. That program is 6 months, and I believe it is scheduled to come to a conclusion in late July. So I believe that would mean they're still technically pending.
Thank you. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. At that point, if you wish to address the board, please proceed.
Yes. First, I'd like to say thank you for even having me here. I've been in the casino business for 20 years. This is the first time anything has ever happened. And they have seen fit to give me the ARD, which I really appreciate, which is up in July 23rd. And I definitely have learned my lesson from this. I had gotten a divorce in May, which has prompted me to do this. And since then, I've lost my job, I lost my house, my car, my animals, and my kids are being taken away this summer. And I'd just like to get consideration of possibly being able to go back into the gaming industry again so I can try and get my life back on track.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board for Ms. Cheatham?
No.
No one? Okay. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, can we just go at ease for a second?
Excuse me?
Can we go at ease
Yes,
just for a second? I want to.
Certainly. Is there anything further, Doug?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, you understand, you admit the facts here, right?
Yes,
And you understand how serious that is, especially in the casinos of this state,
absolutely.
and that the board has an obligation to make sure that the law is upheld, that the regulations are applied fairly, and this kind of conduct which you exhibited is extremely serious
Yes, it is.
and can seriously undermine the credibility of casinos here in the state of Pennsylvania. You understand that, right?
I absolutely understand, and as I said, I have learned from my mistake, absolutely. Everything has been taken away from me.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, give me the facts one more time. Just run through them.
Yes, the individual was working as the box person at the craps table. She was a G2 employee, which is a upper level gaming employee. It had been detected that she had placed 6 $500 gaming chips inside her clothing and it secreted them in the clothing. It was seen, caught on surveillance and verified, after which presumably that the report to the state police resulted in the charges.
Okay, thanks, Mr. If I may?
Yes, please.
Mr. Chairman, I move the board grant the Office of Enforcement Counsel's request to revoke Brandy McKaylee Cheatham's gaming employee occupation permit, as well as to place her on the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The second petition before the board today is the Office of Enforcement Counsel's request to place David Glazer on the involuntary exclusion list. I don't see anybody identifying themselves as Mr. Glazer, although he did indicate he was on his way.
Let's postpone that for now, proceed with the rest. If he shows up at the end of the proceeding, if he's not here, he'll be the last item on the agenda, okay?
Then we'll switch to the withdrawals, which Deputy Chief Counsel Steve Cook is here to present.
Morning. The only other thing on the Office of Chief Counsel's agenda are 3 petitions for withdrawals or surrenders of credentials filed by Advanced Gaming Associates, LLC, Linda S. Cook, no relation, and Herbert Lugmeyer. The Office of Chief Counsel has no objections to any of these withdrawals or surrenders. As a result, if the board chooses to grant the request, they'd be doing so without prejudice to each requester. I would note, however, that Advanced Gaming Associates petition requests a pro rata refund of the $45,000 three-year supplier license fee it paid in April of 2016. The facts triggering this request are that Advanced Gaming merged into and became part of American Gaming and Electronics Incorporated just 7 months after having renewed its supplier license and paid that fee. American Gaming and Electronics subsequently, post-merger, submitted an application to the board to become a supplier itself. That company's application is presently under review with the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement, and it is likely that matter will come before the board for licensure in one of the next few meetings. If American Gaming and Electronics is ultimately approved for a supplier license, that new company will be required to pay a $25,000 licensing fee. So because of this situation, Advanced Gaming is seeking a pro rata, or basically a 2/3 refund of the $45,000 fee that it paid.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue orders to approve the withdrawals and surrenders as described by the Office of Chief Counsel. I further move that Advanced Gaming Associate LLC's request for a pro rata refund of its supplier license renewal be granted effective today's date.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
And with that, we'll hold the Glazer matter until the end.
Remember to remind me of that as we get to the end. Sue Hensel, Office of Director of Bureau of Licensing.
Thank you, Chairman Barish and members of the board. Before the board today will be 2 table game manufacturer renewal licenses and 553 principal key gaming and non-gaming employee applicants. In addition, there will be the consideration of 7 gaming service provider applicants. The first matter for your consideration is the renewal of the Gaming Partners International USA, Inc. table game manufacturer license. Gaming Partners International USA is an Atlantic City, New Jersey-based company that manufactures, among other items, gaming chips, tables, playing cards, dice, and gaming table layouts. It also serves as a supplier for its associated company, GPI Mexicana, whose license we will take up next. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigation of the company, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. I have provided you with a draft order and ask that the board consider the order to renew the table game manufacturer license.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Thank you.
The details of the coming memos are not an accurate reflection of the conversation that they had. So, what they want is they want to see the memo. They want to hear from Comey. They want to hear more from.
Okay.
Voice from above.
Voice from, yes.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the renewal of Gaming Partners International USA, Inc.'s table game manufacturer license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next for your consideration is the renewal of the GPI Mexicana S.A. de CV table game manufacturer license. GPI Mexicana is a Mexico-based company that manufactures gaming chips, playing cards, dice, gaming table layouts, and other gaming products. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigation, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. I have provided you with a draft order and ask that the board consider the order to renew the table game manufacturer license.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Thank you, Cyrus. Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Chairman, I move that the board approve the renewal of GPI Mexicana S.A. de CV's table game manufacturer license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
In addition, for your consideration is the approval of principal and key employee licenses. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a proposed order for 1 principal and 2 key employee licenses. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the issuance of principal and key employee licenses as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
There are also temporary principal and key employee licenses. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order regarding the issuance of temporary licenses for 1 principal and 6 key employees. I ask that the board consider the order approving the licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the issuance of temporary principal and key employee credentials as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next are gaming permits and non-gaming registrations. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a list of 361 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted temporary or full occupation permits, and 149 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted registrations under the authority delegated to the Bureau of Licensing. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the order.
Questions or comments from the
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the issuance of gaming employee occupation permits and non-gaming employee registrations as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
It is. I could hear it too. It was not me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's something that comes up during the line. It wasn't me.
All right. We won't blame you for it then, Amina. All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Also, there are recommendations of denial for 1 gaming service provider and 5 gaming employee applicants. In each case, the applicant failed to request a hearing within the specified time frame. The Bureau of Licensing has provided you with orders addressing the applicants who the Office of Enforcement Counsel has recommended for denial. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the denials.
Office of Enforcement Counsel will request denial in each instance. We would also request that the gaming service provider be placed on the prohibited gaming service providers list.
Okay, thank you, Cyrus. Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board deny the gaming service provider and gaming employee applications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Additionally, for your consideration are withdrawal requests for key and gaming employees. In each case, the permit or registration is no longer required. For today's meeting, I have provided the board with a list of 1 key, 24 gaming, and 2 non-gaming employee withdrawals for approval. I ask that the board consider the order approving these lists of withdrawals.
Enforcement Counsel?
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the withdrawals as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next, we have an order to certify the following gaming service providers: Indian Ridge Provisions, Inc. and PPB Energy Partners, LLC. I ask that the board consider the order approving these gaming service providers for certification.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applications for gaming service provider certification as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Finally, for your consideration are gaming service provider registrations. The Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order and an attached list of 5 registered gaming service provider applicants. I ask that the board consider the order registering these gaming service providers.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applicants for gaming service provider registration as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. That concludes the matters of the Bureau of Licensing.
The Office of Enforcement Counsel will present 18 matters today for the board's consideration, consisting of 2 consent agreements, 4 suspensions, and 12 involuntary exclusions. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Category 3 Management Company, IOCPA LLC, doing business as Lady Luck Casino, through the Category 3 license issued to Woodlands Fayette LLC. The matter will be presented by Assistant Enforcement Counsel Benjamin Farrell. Representatives for Lady Luck Casino are present, and at this time I would request that those individuals introduce themselves. There's only one individual, okay? And if necessary, stand and be sworn.
Gary Hendricks, Hendricks, Vice President and General Manager of Lady Luck.
Thank you very much. If you'd be sworn at this point.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Benjamin Farrell, F-E-R-R-E-L-L. The next matter for your consideration is a proposed consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and IOCPA LLC. On February 23rd, 2017, 2 blue guards went missing during table game play and were later discovered in an automatic shuffler. A surveillance review of the incident determined that between 2:31 p.m. and 7:24 p.m., on 5 separate occasions, the automatic shuffler malfunctioned, indicating that the blue deck was missing cards. On each occasion, the dealer continued table game play with the compromised blue deck. The surveillance review determined that approximately 205 hands were played using this compromised blue deck, and the compromised blue deck of cards was in play for approximately 4 hours and 53 minutes. The surveillance review further determined that 8 different players were impacted by the compromised play, and as a result, a total of $215 was returned to the players. Under the terms agreed upon, Lady Luck would pay a civil penalty of $10,000 as well as a $2,500 investigative fee. At this time, OEC requests the board approve this consent agreement.
Any comments?
None for this one.
None?
None.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
So I think I heard 8 players affected and $215 returned?
Yes. Correct.
How was that determined?
Through surveillance video, watching the.
How was the $215 though?
They were the 2 players. That's what they bought in for. That's what they lost. We reimbursed
2
them for their
players?
losses. Yes.
I thought it was 8 players.
The other players won.
Yes, the other players did this.
So it was 2 and okay. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments from the board? If not, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and IOCPA LLC as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and IGT Global Solutions Corporation. This matter will be presented by Senior Enforcement Counsel Glenn Stewart. Ms. Marie Jones is here on behalf of IGT Global Solutions Corporation. And at this time, I turn it over to Mr. Stewart.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. It's Stewart, S-T-U-A-R-T. Next for the board's consideration is a consent agreement entered into between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and manufacturer licensee IGT Global Solutions Corporation. Between the expiration of Donald Schweitzer's principal license on October 8, 2016, and the filing of his current initial principal license application and remittance of the requisite application fee on January 12, 2017, Mr. Schweitzer did not hold any license, permit, registration, or any other authorization issued by the board in connection with his service as a director and chairman of the board of IGT Global Solutions Corporation. Despite not having a valid license, permit, registration, or any other authorization issued by the board, IGT Global Solutions Corporation allowed Mr. Schweitzer to function as a director and chairman of the board. In sum, IGT Global Solutions Corporation allowed an unlicensed employee to serve on its board of directors and function in the position of chairman of the board of directors for approximately 96 days. The terms of the consent agreement would require IGT Global Solutions Corporation to pay a civil penalty in the amount of $12,500 for allowing an unlicensed employee to serve as a director and chairman of the board of directors for approximately 96 days. And IGT Global Solutions Corporation is also required to remit $2,500 to the board for investigative costs incurred in relation to this consent agreement. This consent agreement is now ripe for the board's consideration.
Could you please state and spell your name for the court reporter?
Good morning, Marie Jones from Fox Rothschild here on behalf of IGT Global Solutions.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, board members. We'd like to urge you to adopt this consent agreement. During the time period, IGT had just merged with GTEC Corporation, and they were going through certain transitions within their licensing and compliance department to enhance their capabilities. Mr. Schweitzer had been previously licensed, and this was unfortunately a renewal that fell through the cracks during the integration. They have taken a number of measures to upgrade their systems and to ensure items like this do not occur in the future.
Are there any questions or comments from the board at this point? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and IGT Global Solutions Corporation as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
The next four matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel has filed complaints seeking the suspension of 3 gaming permits and 1 non-gaming registration issued by the Board. Each complaint has been filed with the Board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the person named in each complaint. The person named in each complaint failed to respond within 30 days as required by Board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment and properly served the same upon each named individual. Therefore, the facts in each complaint are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the Board, and the matters are presently ripe for the Board's consideration. In each instance, we will provide a brief summation of the facts and request the appropriate Board action.
Good morning, Chairman Barish, fellow members of the Board. John Pokoneski, P-O-K-I-N-I-E-W-S-K-I, for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the Board's consideration is the suspension of gaming employee permit issued to Rayson McCourty for his employment as a table games dealer. On November 13th, 2016, Mr. McCourty was arrested and charged with a felony and 2 misdemeanor drug offenses. Recently, Mr. McCourty pled guilty to 2 counts of the Pennsylvania Controlled Substance, Drugs, Device, and Cosmetic Act, including possession of marijuana and use and possession of drug paraphernalia, and is currently serving his criminal sentence. As a result, OEC requests that the gaming employee permit issued to Rayson McCourty be suspended.
Questions or comments from the Board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board approve the suspension of Rayson McCourty's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good morning, Chairman Barish, members of the Board. Sarah Kolesar, K-O-L-E-S-A-R, Assistant Enforcement Counsel with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the Board's consideration is the suspension of the non-gaming employee registration issued to Peter Palmatier. Mr. Palmatier was previously employed as an environmental services attendant. Mr. Palmatier was arrested and criminally charged with a felony for utilizing another person's bank ATM card to access and withdraw $500 from a bank account that he did not have permission to access. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the Board suspend the non-gaming registration issued to Peter Palmatier.
Questions or comments from the Board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board approve the suspension of Peter Palmatier non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter on the agenda for the Board's consideration is the suspension of the gaming employee permit issued to Lemuel Servano. Mr. Servano was previously employed as a table game dealer at Parks Casino. Mr. Servano was arrested and criminally charged with a felony, 8 misdemeanors, and 3 summaries as a result of a domestic dispute where Mr. Servano allegedly assaulted a female victim, held her against her will, and resisted arrest. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the Board suspend the gaming permit issued to Lemuel Servano.
Questions or comments from the Board? May I have a motion?
Chairman, I move that the Board approve the suspension of Lemuel Servano's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter on the agenda for the Board's consideration is the suspension of the gaming employee permit issued to Levon Sizemore. Mr. Sizemore was previously employed as a security officer at Rivers Casino. Mr. Sizemore was arrested, criminally charged, convicted, and is currently serving a sentence for various drug crimes. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the Board suspend the gaming permit issued to Levon Sizemore.
Questions or comments from the Board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board approve the suspension of Levon Sizemore's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter for the Board's
The remaining 12 matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel has filed petitions seeking the involuntary exclusion of individuals whose presence in a licensed facility are inimical to the interests of the Commonwealth and/or licensed gaming therein. In each instance, the petition for exclusion has been filed with the Board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the individual named in the petition. The individual named in the petition failed to respond within 30 days as required by Board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment in each instance and properly served the same upon each named individual. Therefore, all facts in each petition are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the board, and the matters are presently ripe for the board's consideration. In each instance, if the board orders a proposed exclusion, each individual's photo, personal identifiers, and a summary of their inimical conduct will be placed on the board's public website.
The next matter for the board's consideration is the involuntary exclusion of David Barone as a result of Mr. Barone using a Pennsylvania driver's license belonging to another person to access the gaming floor at Rivers Casino while under the age of 21. As a result, OEC requests that the board issue an order placing David Barone on the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of David Barone to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel. I further move that Mr. Barone may petition for removal from the list after 1 year.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good morning again. The next matter for the board's consideration is request to place Jared Pellis onto the board's involuntary exclusion list. On January 17th, 2017, Mr. Pellis, as a part of a group of 3 individuals, was asked to leave Rivers Casino after the group created a disturbance on the gaming floor. Mr. Pellis, without provocation, shoved another patron multiple times and behaved in a threatening, disorderly manner towards Rivers' security staff. Mr. Pellis was charged by the Pennsylvania State Police with a 1 count of harassment, subject other to physical contact, and 1 count of disorderly conduct, engaging in fighting. Ultimately, Mr. Pellis pled guilty to the 1 count of harassment, subject other to physical contact. At this time, OEC requests that the board place Mr. Pellis on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board?
May I ask one question?
Yes, please.
Just point of clarification, you said it was the Pennsylvania State Police or the Pittsburgh City Police?
It was the Pennsylvania State Police.
Thank you.
May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Jared Pellis to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Tamara Haken with the Office of Enforcement Counsel, HAKEN. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the involuntary exclusion of Nicholas Anderson. On January 17, 2017, Mr. Anderson was part of a group of 3 individuals who caused a disturbance at the Rivers Casino by refusing to leave after he and his group were asked to do so. For his part, Mr. Anderson hid on the gaming floor while security personnel attempted to escort him out and placed his hand on the chest of security personnel after being told not to do so. Mr. Anderson was arrested by the Pennsylvania State Police and charged with 3 summary offenses: defiant trespass, disorderly conduct, and harassment. As a result, OEC requests that the board issue an order placing Nicholas Anderson on the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Nicholas Anderson to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion's adopted.
Thank you. Glenn Stewart again for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next for the board's consideration is the placement of Thomas McGarvey Jr. on the board's involuntary exclusion list. Between March 2015 and July 2015, Mr. McGarvey used a fraudulent gaming voucher and used other patrons' total reward credits to wager at Harrah's Philadelphia. Mr. McGarvey was subsequently charged with 1 count of theft by unlawful taking, 1 count of theft by deception, 1 count of access device and counterfeit, 1 count of access device issued to another, 1 count of possessing access device, and 1 count of forgery. In April 2016, Mr. McGarvey pled guilty to 1 count of theft by deception. As a result, Mr. McGarvey was sentenced to 5 years of probation. He was ordered to have no direct or indirect contact with the victim, and he was ordered to pay Harrah's $3,735 in restitution. The Office of Enforcement Counsel now respectfully requests the board issue an order placing Thomas McGarvey Jr. on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Thomas McGarvey to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. John Crowe, CROHE, for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter before the board is a petition to place Joel Garcia Rivera on the board's excluded persons list for entering the gaming floor at Mohegans on Pocono while only 20 years of age and gaming for approximately 42 minutes. Mr. Garcia Rivera was charged by Pennsylvania State Police with 1 count of defiant trespass, and this matter is still active. The Office of Enforcement Counsel now asks that Mr. Garcia Rivera be added to the board's excluded persons list.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? If not, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Joel Garcia Rivera to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel. I further move that Mr. Garcia Rivera may petition for removal from the list after 1 year.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Morning once again, Michael Rowland with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next is a request to place Maria Gomez on the involuntary exclusion list. Ms. Gomez, age 20, gained access to the gaming floor at Sands Casino through the use of her U.S. passport 3 separate times. She was on the gaming floor for approximately 1 hour and 52 minutes and gamed at 5 separate slot machines. She also consumed alcoholic beverages. She was not charged by the Pennsylvania State Police, and the matter is now before the board to consider the placement of Maria Gomez on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
Did she deceive or attempt to deceive anybody in gaining access to the floor?
She did not. The first time she attempted to gain access, the security officer actually looked at the passport, misread it. The second time, when she left the floor and came back again, another security officer looked at it, misread it. The third time, she wasn't even carded, and it was the fourth attempt to get back on that they actually realized her age. But it was a legitimate passport.
Okay.
One
Any other
question, Mr. Chairman.
questions or comments?
Was it a United States passport?
It was.
Okay. Thank you.
May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Maria Gomez to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel. I further move that Ms. Gomez may petition for removal from the list after 1 year.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes no. Motion is adopted.
Next is a request to place Amber Morgan on the involuntary exclusion list. Ms. Morgan, age 18, gained access to the gaming floor at Sands Casino after passing 2 security guards at the main entrance unchallenged. She was on the floor for approximately 3 hours and 15 minutes, at which time she gamed at 15 separate slot machines. She was not charged by the Pennsylvania State Police, and the matter is now before the board to consider the placement of Amber Morgan on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Amber Morgan to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel. I further move that Ms. Morgan may petition for removal from the list after her 22nd birthday.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Next is a request to place Aman Mohammed on the involuntary exclusion list. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Mr. Mohammed on the exclusion list for committing theft at Parks Casino on September the 20th, 2016. Mr. Mohammed was charged by the Pennsylvania State Police with theft of property, and that charge remains pending. The matter is now before the board to consider the placement of Aman Mohammed on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Ayman Mohammed to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next, we have a request to place Labiba Mohammed on the involuntary exclusion list. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Ms. Mohammed on the exclusion list for breaking into a vehicle at Parks Casino and stealing numerous items on October 16, 2016. Ms. Mohammed was charged by the Bensalem Township Police with theft from a motor vehicle and receiving stolen property. Both of those charges are still pending, and the matter is now before the board to consider the placement of Labiba Mohammed on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Labiba Muhammad to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Good morning, Chairman Barish, members of the board. David Tepper, TEPPER, Assistant Enforcement Counsel with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda is a request to place Yadel Friedman on the involuntary exclusion list. Mr. Friedman used a false identification card while underage in an attempt to gain access to the gaming floor at Mount Airy Casino. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board add Yadel Friedman to the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Yadel Freeman to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel. I further move that Mr. Freeman may petition for removal from the list anytime after his 22nd birthday.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next on the agenda is a request to place Laura Lamb on the involuntary exclusion list. Ms. Lamb used a false identification card while underage in an attempt to gain access to the gaming floor at Mount Airy Casino. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board add Laura Lamb to the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Laura Lamb to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel. I further move that Ms. Lamb may petition for removal from the list after 1 year.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next on the agenda is a request to place Elizabeth Lopresti on the involuntary exclusion list. Ms. Lopresti used a false identification card while underage in an attempt to gain access to the gaming floor at Mount Airy Casino. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board add Elizabeth Lopresti to the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Elizabeth Lopresti to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel. And I further move that Ms. Lopresti may petition for removal from the list anytime after her 22nd birthday.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The remaining matter is Mr. Glazer's matter if he's present.
Okay, thank you very much. Doug? Proceed.
The second petition, which was on the agenda, which we had skipped over, coming back to now, is the request of the Office of Enforcement Counsel to place David Glazer on the involuntary exclusion list. After originally requesting a hearing, Mr. Glazer and OEC filed a joint stipulation of facts, and thus the formal hearing was waived, so the board can decide the matter based upon the documentary record. Notwithstanding, Mr. Glazer is here to address the board. As stipulated by the parties on April 28, 2016, Mr. Glazer left his 11-year-old son alone in the vehicle in the Sands parking garage while he entered the casino to retrieve a phone which was in the possession of a friend of his. Mr. Glazer was on the gaming floor for a total of 32 minutes, during which he played at a slot machine for 23 minutes. The stipulation further states that while on the gaming floor retrieving the phone, Mr. Glazer checked his player's card and found that he had free play available. He decided to use the free play, believing that it would only be a few minutes until it ran out, and that his son would be fine during the time. Mr. Glazer agreed that it was a poor decision on his part to leave the child in the car. However, he was not criminally charged, but was evicted from the Sands Casino. With that explanation, Mr. Glazer is here to address the board.
Mr. Glazer.
Good morning, board.
Make sure you lean.
I'm sorry. Everything they said, it's true. I went to retrieve my phone,
And I told my son I left his cell phone he had. And I said, of course, if there's any issues, call me. I figured I'd just be right in and out. I found out I had free play when I was there. I put my card in, and Murphy's Law actually won. And as I'm playing, I took the money out, and then I heard my name over the loudspeaker. Well, I immediately tried to call my son, figuring something had happened. And his phone went dead. He was reading a book in the car. I normally don't leave my son in a car anywhere. I figured in the Sands Casino, being in the parking garage, it was safe because I know their security is excellent there. And I figured I'm just running in to retrieve a phone. It was a horrible decision, of course, to leave my son in really anytime. I wasn't aware that I was breaking any kind of law. I'm sure you guys are aware that I believe any children under the age of 7 can't be left. Since then, I've talked to the Sands Casino, and they said they've, I believe, made it the age 14. But either way, I can understand where they're coming from, and they had told me just to write a letter, and they let me back in. Because this happened, I believe, over a year ago now. And I just figured I wasn't going to go in there before writing the letter. I figured I did wrong. I was going to wait, 6 months, a year before writing the letter to security. And like they said, the Bethlehem Bethlehem Police came to the scene and said, it was a horrible decision. There was nothing I did criminally illegal. And the officer told me to apologize to my son, which I did. He ended up getting the money that I won on the game. Again, I just hope that the world will see that, I was looking over the exclusion list, and it says, and I looked at online who these people are, and I just feel that, I don't belong in that list. And it says exclusion of individuals who are career or professional offenders. And I just don't feel that I'm, one of those persons. I do understand that I did wrong. Security, they had said they had a lot of problems with people coming there and leaving their children like for 3 or 4 hours, which is, there's no excuse for that. But I'm hoping, since I've already voluntarily not went in or tried to write the letter up to this point, that I've, been excluded for a time, and then I hope that the board would see that, this will never happen again. It was just a poor decision, and I hope they can have leniency on me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the board for Mr. Glazer?
Very quickly, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Sherman, the professional offender aspect of this, I can assume, can I not, that may have been in the petition, but that's not a basis for what would possibly be the board's decision here, correct?
Correct. There are a number of different grounds upon which somebody can be placed on the exclusion list. I would agree that one would not seem to apply here. I think the one that would apply would be that the conduct at the casino placed another person in danger. Would probably be the provision upon which one would rely for this petition.
And the treatment of this case is consistent with the treatment of all the other cases we have involving the same type incident, that is an underage child being left in a vehicle.
Yes, all of them, the facts are a little nuanced, but the same basic concept, yes.
All right. Thank you.
Any further comments from Mr. Glazer?
Yeah, I just want to say, I wasn't sure how, since it wasn't illegal what I did, I know it's a moral issue, but I just don't know how, what other moral issues could be brought up that I'm unaware of, that, one person might think my son is, 5'10". Now he's 12. He was about to turn 12. He babysits. He's certified in CPR. He's very mature for his age, and I left him with a cell phone. I don't feel that I left my kid in danger at all, in being the fact that it wasn't out like when people leave their children. I called the state police, and they said people could go to Walmart and leave their 8-year-old in the car for an hour, and that's not illegal. It's poor judgment. I felt my son knew what I was doing as far as getting the phone, and so I just asked for leniency.
I understand.
Thank you.
I understand.
But help me. Yeah. You went in to get your phone, and then you started a game.
Well, I went in to get my phone, and the person that gave it to me said that, on Thursdays there's, quote, free money. I guess the best way to say it. And I put my card in, and there was $30
When did
available.
it click in your head that, man, I got my 11-year-old and my son, maybe I shouldn't game?
Right out when I hit the button and
Your name came over the loudspeaker?
No, it was before that. That's when I was cashing out. And then I heard my name. And the reason it took me so long to get, I had to go to security. I wasn't aware of where security was. And so I ran over to security because they had said, well, I guess they have it correctly that I was actually, they said, I thought it was 15 minutes on the machine itself. Clearly bad judgment. My son, again, I don't believe I put him in danger because he had a cell phone and I was retrieving my cell phone. So I figured there was any kind of issue and he was reading a book for school the next day. But again, I can't, say that I wasn't wrong. I was wrong. I just feel that myself, I purposely did not write the letter to Sands, to let myself in. I figured, there should be some kind of punishment there. And then I went ahead and did it myself by not writing the letter. Because as I understand it, the head of security has no problem letting me back in, Sands.
Mr. What time of the day was this?
This is about 7 o'clock, 7:30, I think, 8.
It was not late during the evening. It was
PM.
early, yes.
Yeah. Your son wasn't with you before. You went to retrieve your cell phone.
Right. We were out driving around in Bethlehem, and my friend called and told me.
You left your cell phone at the casino?
Yes.
Was your son with you the first time that you went?
No.
Any other questions, bench? My only observation is what the board may or may not do here today is not imposing any kind of criminal sanction. This is a question of whether or not we use our administrative powers, which we have the authority to do, to exclude people from casinos who we think have engaged in inappropriate or potentially dangerous situations vis-a-vis another. So just to make it clear, whatever happens here, you're not getting a criminal record out of it. Okay? Just make sure we're clear about that. With having said that, any other questions or comments from the board? Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the Office of Enforcement Counsel's petition to place David Glazer on the PGCB involuntary exclusion list. I further move that Mr. Glazer shall automatically come off the board's involuntary exclusion list after 6 months.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is granted. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, board. I apologize for this and the waste your time.
Thank you.
6 months. Okay. So just I counted. So there's nothing I have to write or anything.
No, not us. You will automatically be reinstated at the end of the 6 months, okay?
All right, thank you, board.
Thank you. Okay. That concludes the business of today's board meeting. Our next scheduled public session will be held on Wednesday, June 7th. The meeting will begin at 10 a.m. in this room. Are there any other final comments from the board or ex officio members? Hearing none, I have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Mr. Chairman, as a note of interest, you almost came to the shortest meeting, but close, doesn't count. Having said that, I make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The motion's adopted. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.